Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. In the seas around Hawaii, 29 countries are converging with 40 ships, 150 aircraft and 25,000 personnel to help what they say is ensure the safety of sea lanes and security on the world's oceans. But the world's largest international naval exercise has been dismissed by Beijing as a muscle show. In 2018, China was disinvited from RIMPAC by the Trump administration because of Beijing's continued militarization of features in the South China Sea, a vast waterway claimed by 7 nations, though China believes its claims trump all the rest. The Pentagon spokesperson at the time said, "We have strong evidence that China has deployed anti-ship missiles, surface-to-air systems and electronic jammers to contested features in the Spratlys." Beijing's landing of a bomber aircraft at Woody Island in the Paracels has also raised tensions. 6 years on, we ask what makes this year's event significant, what message it sends to China, and how effective it can be in deterring Chinese aggressive behavior in the Taiwan Strait and the South and East China Seas. Joining us today are Tianlin Yan, Taipei School of Economics and Political Science Foundation's Center for Peace and Security Project Manager, and Tony Hu, former U.S. Department of Defense Senior Director for China, Taiwan and Mongolia, and Ronan Fu, Academia Sinica Institute of Political Science Assistant Research Fellow. A very warm welcome to all of you on the show today. This year's RIMPAC is the largest iteration to date, and organisers say a decommissioned warship will be sunk in a live-fire sinking exercise, or SINKEX. Reports say they will use the former amphibious assault ship USS Tarawa. Let's take a look. So, Ronan, why is the SINKEX seen as sending a pointed message to China?
Yeah, so we have to understand that RIMPAC basically showcased the collective strength and readiness of U.S. and allied forces. And in terms of the syntax, it involves, for example, the decommissioned USS Tarawa. It sends a very clear signal of the operational capabilities of the U.S. forces and its allied. Right, so the reason why it's sending a very pointed message to China because it suggests potential consequences of any possible Chinese aggression, particularly in the Taiwan Strait and also the South China Sea contingencies.
Tony, collective strength there, as Ronan said, but why particularly China? How do they see this particular ship, 40,000-ton amphibious assault ship, as targeting China?
I guess it wants to make sure China understands that as they develop carriers, it is vulnerable to the collective defense of the coalition. So I believe that's why they selected this ship.
Okay, so is it to do with, Captain Yan, the fact that only China is the only country to be operating this size of ship in this region?
Yes. I think POA Navy now is, in the last 3 decades, they've been modeling U.S. Navy. So whatever U.S. Navy has, they will try to build and own those kind of capability. Now they have 3 or 4 amphibious assault ships now, and it was reported that could be totally 8 of them. And it was saying they will use this, in U.S. term, they coded the amphibious assault ships, and with the task force, they coded expeditionary amphibious strike force. So it's a major force to use to grab land or grab islands. So in the future, armed conflict between both sides of Taiwan Strait, the LHA, this amphibious assault ship, might be the major weapon system to deliver land forces on Taiwan. So that's very important. And they are building this capability. You see, now U.S. only has about 9 amphibious assault ships. Now they're going to build 8. So in terms of capability, they are almost equal in the next 10, 20 years' time.
Right.
So it's growing very fast.
Right, yeah. And Captain Yen, staying on you, how would you say that this year's RIMPAC is different to previous iterations?
I think the difference is, focus more on, even though officially they did not, say that this exercise is aiming at any countries, but I believe this the exercise is to show this international unity and determination to defend against any country's assertiveness or aggressiveness in this area. So currently you see which country is doing things like that. Aggressiveness and assertiveness is only one country, right? So it's very obvious.
This was in the Global Times. It says that the US hopes to once again hype up the China threat and rhetoric and intensify regional tensions through staging this RIMPAC exercise. What do you make of that?
Well, used to be, RIMPAC was a way to build camaraderie, truly without its specific enemies. But if you look at the motto of this year's RIMPAC, partners, integrated, prepared. What does it mean? Integrated, basically, we are showing our partners in a command structure, the Combined Joint Task Force structure. Right now, the commander is the U.S. Navy 3rd Fleet Commander, Vice Admiral. Then we have Chilean as his deputy, and the vice commander is the Japanese. And under him, there are the maritime component, the air component, land component, the special forces component. The maritime component is actually going to be a Canadian Commodore. The air component is going to be an Australian Air Commodore. And then other forces come together. So we are building a way to allow friends to understand if we have to work together, how does it work? And also, we want to make sure in the exercise that our systems can work together. That means we can communicate, we can share common operating picture, that my guys can service your airplane. Your airplane, if it lands on our ship, we can refuel it because we have the same structures, same connections. So the interoperability is another aspect where we're going to be building. And then we talk about prepared. The motto is prepared. Prepared for what? Prepared to face a common enemy. In this case, there's only one. Maintain a free and open South China Sea is everybody's interest. And having one country say, this is mine, I want to exercise my right of control, that makes China a common enemy.
So this is very interesting because it's also not publicly said whether allies would actually come to help in Taiwan's defense. So does this sort of exercise essentially say that they would? And I'm quite interested in Chile, because obviously Japan, Canada, Australia, these are long-term American allies, right? But Chile, would Chile come into this action if there was perhaps, for instance, a Taiwan contingency?
No, Chile wouldn't come. However, Chilean, believe it or not, Chileans been with RIMPAC forever. The first RIMPAC I participated in was 94. 96 was the second one. Chile was there for 96.
So are they rehearsing for something closer to their home?
I think they want to know how they can fit in case something happens, because the way United States execute warfare, the Combined Joint Task Force, the Joint Task Force structure, and you know this very well, it's always that structure, the command and control, the management, the maritime guy controls everything that flows under the water, the air guy controls everything that flies, including the Navy guy that fly out of the carrier belongs to the air guy. So the way we execute our warfare is the same. So the Southern Command, who has Chile, Southcom, will do the same thing if something happens on that end. So I wouldn't think they will participate in the Taiwan scenario, but many of the countries in this exercise would, including many of the European countries.
Ronan.
I would like to second to that. I also don't think that Chile is coming to Taiwan's rescue. If there's
so what's the use of having this Chilean then as the, the deputy commander, I think it is, of the Combined Task Force?
Yeah.
Why not have a country that actually is more likely to?
The Japanese was actually in that position. I think it might be rotational. Singaporean played a real important role last year, actually, it's hard to answer. This is having Chilean as deputy.
Germany, France, these are India.
Yeah.
It's definitely a curveball, but let me try. I think for Chile, it's more like learning exercises, and they want, so they are long-time partners, so they also want to learn. And like Tony said, I think it's on a rotational basis, so everybody can take turns and learn. But I think overall, it's a demonstration of resolve and a demonstration of coordinated capabilities.
So it kind of flies in the face of what China was saying, that this was just a muscle show. It's, the US being a paper tiger.
Well, actually, this exercise has a long history ever since 1971. After Cold War, this exercise, even though it's the biggest maritime exercise in the world, but mainly it's focused on HNDR, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, and improve mutual understanding, improve interoperability, all those kind of things. Anyway, all those military exercises prepare for future contingency. You never know. So to show that this exercise still maintains original intention and characteristics, since Chile has been early participants in this exercise, they have shown their professionalism, they have shown their capability. Why not give them a chance to lead this?
Tony, so let's talk about some of the big weapon systems. So the USS Carl Vinson is taking part. So our 3 submarines, 2 of them US, and several Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. There's also Germany's Baden-Württemberg-class frigate. Tell us about, what other notable systems are taking part, and what's the significance of them for the actual scenarios?
The exercise does have aggressor and a defender role, and I don't know how this 29 countries get divided up, but what's really interesting is if you look at the exercise and look at the assets, it is really great that Koreans bring in their diesel electric submarines. They did that 2 years ago also. So this diesel electric submarine basically allowed the coalition forces to practice anti-submarine warfare because China has many diesel electric submarine, attack submarines, and they will be the #1 target if China starts anything hostile, and we'll be out there hunting and killing them. That will be the primary targets.
Ronan, just finally, final question on RIMPAC. Taiwan has failed many times to gain even observership to RIMPAC, despite the invitation being written into the National Defense Authorization Act, and also regular calls by US congressmen for Taiwan's participation. Now, I want to talk about this one angle of this issue, which is that some military experts say, in fact, Taiwan doesn't lose out by not being part of RIMPAC, because Taiwan essentially has to defend its territory, and essentially the rest of the sort of deterrence of China can be left to allies and partners.
Yeah, so to a certain extent, I agree that Taiwan doesn't lose much. So it sounds like a missed opportunity, but the reason why Taiwan doesn't lose much is because Taiwan's strategic importance and also Taiwan's strategic partnership with the United States, and also some joint military exercises, they still continued. So that doesn't really hurt Taiwan. But having said that, I think earning observership can certainly help, so that Taiwan can understand, for example, how the allies and also the United States do things. So how can Taiwan contribute? So that when this contingency were to happen, Taiwan knows how to work with other allies. So I think that it's the part that I disagree is that Taiwan will do something on its own. I don't think that Taiwan can do anything on our own. We have to get ready. But the mindset should, I will get ready, but I also want to be prepared for some, coordination among ally countries such as, the United States, Australia, Japan, and South Korea. So I think that's the right mindset. So trying hard to continue winning the observership will be key.
From my point of view, any exercise, they divide it in two parts. First, planning phase, then implement phases. Implement phases are full of news, so it's a lot of visibility. Probably is one of the reasons not to invite Taiwan is because of that. But planning phase, so no visibility at all. So maybe we can be invited to join the planning phase, that we can have a joint or combined planning experience on this huge maritime exercise, how to prepare for that, how to coordinate with allied countries to prepare for any potential conflict.
Yeah, because
so that's very important. We treasure that kind of experience, joint planning, combined planning, more than really sending forces to participate in those games.
Yeah, because RIMPAC, the initial planning conference happens the year before in November, then the mid-planning conference happens in March, and final planning conference happened in June, then the exercise.
Now, the Philippines is not sending any ships to RIMPAC because it needs all vessels to remain in the South China Sea, where tensions continue to mount. On June 17th, a violent clash between the China Coast Guard and a Philippine military vessel resulted in a Philippine Navy officer losing a finger. And on June 30th, the Philippine Coast Guard said their efforts to rescue fishermen from a sinking boat with an electric fire on board were blocked by the Chinese Coast Guard. Some Filipino commentators are saying the U.S. must do more to show its commitment to the 1951 U.S.-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty in order to reassure Filipinos of their security. However, Manila says it has not asked for U.S. help, nor indeed considered invoking the Mutual Defense Treaty. Ronan, we're not at Marcus's red line of a Filipino being killed, but how close do you think we are to it since these two incidents? And also, if we can talk about the Mutual Defense Treaty's definition of an armed attack, how close are we to that?
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet, but this incident did illustrate the fragility of the status quo. And if something, something escalatory were to happen in the future, we cannot rule out the possibility that, the certain, articles may be invoked from the Filipino side. But that is premised on the condition that the Philippines and China will try to escalate. But I don't think that is very possible in the coming month. Mainly because of two reasons. Number one is an incoming American presidential election. And number two, Xi Jinping is trying very hard to stabilize the domestic conditions. So I don't think that, anything crazy will happen in the coming month. But I do want to emphasize that, this incident can basically illustrate maybe in the future, something, if China were to employ a more assertive response. Basically, the Philippines and the U.S., they being reactive, they should try to answer China's action in kind. And that kind of unintended consequences is a possibility that we have to take into account.
Tony, that's interesting because Ronan said that China won't want to do anything crazy. To many people, June 7th in the coming months, yes. But for many people, June 17th was pretty crazy. What do you think of Ronan's idea that the Philippines should essentially match this grey zone, or sorry, ICAT, illegal, coercive, aggressive, deceptive behaviour?
I think
would that not escalate? Because actually, the Philippines has been quite careful about not retaliating, essentially in any way.
Yeah, the Philippines are trying to escalation control, like in a better word. So they being tried to downplay it a little bit. However, I'm afraid China has always demonstrated where they only recognize real power, hard power. So as Filipino continue to back down, I think China will continue to move forward with even more aggressive activities.
So you actually agree with Ronan then?
Yeah. And they will continue to move forward, but they won't cross that line. They will judge because that line is moving.
So going to that line though, Tony, an armed attack, so an axe and knives is not an armed attack. Is this just very clear to to military people, is it? I mean, to an average person.
To us, it is an armed attack. You know, if you show hostile intention, and those things can take a life. You don't want to wait until they take a life. So, you know, maybe, I don't know, TL, how do you feel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, from a military point of view, that's not armed attack.
It's not. So it has to be firepower.
So NATO Article 5, NATO Charter Article 5, Mutual Defense Treaty Article 5 with U.S., with Japan, with Korea, with Philippines, they're all the same. Armed attack means military attack. So that's why.
So a firearm. It has
firearm,
to be.
exactly.
Well,
exactly.
What we're talking about is acts.
You need a lawyer to explain this,
Yeah,
but I believe it's a military attack, armed attack, instead of those with a knife, with stone, with bat.
If that knife is on the military hand, it's what we're talking about. That makes a difference. See, if it's a Coast Guard or the people that's on the boat in uniform, and they have, in this case, they have an axe, reach over to grab things and knives. I think, wouldn't that
It hasn't happened yet. I think both sides would be very cautious. Because of mutual defense treaty, I think China would not give, I agree with Roland, would not give the United States or Philippines any excuse to say that triggered mutual defense treaty. That would be very, very bad for them.
Yeah.
So from the very beginning, they send maritime militia, you know, create a maritime phalanx, more than 200 ships get together. Then now Coast Guards. I don't believe they are going to use of the Navy forces to get into this, you know, this dispute on the Second Thomas Show.
But they will definitely keep harassing you. Yeah, that's for sure.
It will continue.
Yeah.
It will continue.
Tony, what increasing U.S. activity have we seen in the region, especially in the Philippines and elsewhere?
Well, U.S. has really deployed a lot of forces to the Philippines to try to maintain deterrence. For example, the Marine Aviation Support Activity that's just concluded on June 21st, the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment actually was in the Philippines for 75 days. And most of the time they were deployed up in northern Luzon, where it's try to stabilize not only the Philippines, but also the Taiwan scenario. And 2 weeks ago when I was at Clark Air Base, the Marine F-35 Bravo was there and doing live fire exercise. The young man was loading live bombs onto this aircraft. And the day when they were leaving, which I was leaving, the F-22s and F-18s came in for continuous presence. And so U.S. forces' presence in the Philippines has increased dramatically just from last year.
And this is not what China wants, though, is it?
Well, it is deterrence, you know, the U.S. presence. And as far as other places, the B-1Bs just got deployed to Guam for 90 days.
So China's actions are, we can say that they're backfiring.
You can say that. You know, they continue to demonstrate so-called strength. For example, Carl Vinson just went to a RIMPAC. When Carl Vinson was in South China Sea, China's ship stayed in Hainan Island. But as he was leaving to a RIMPAC, they came out and they said, look, Shandong came out and American ran away. You know, and they did this when Ronald Reagan was leaving to go home, and they were in South China Sea. They did the same thing when Ronald Reagan was there for 3 weeks and leaving, and all of a sudden the Chinese came out and said, look, we come out and the Americans are running away. So they doing this propaganda that demonstrate to their own people strength. But in fact is, when there is true strength, they sort of retreat. So the presence of U.S. troops in the Philippines hopefully will maintain deterrence and reduce the likelihood of a conflict.
Captain, final question. Some Filipino analysts are saying that China is testing the U.S. response time in the South China Sea to gauge what its response time might be in a Taiwan crisis.
To some extent, yes, I agree with that. But in essence, I think there are a lot of difference. Beijing and Philippines, they are, you know, it's regulated by international relations. It's a state-to-state relations. But Beijing considers Taiwan as internal affairs. So it's a lot of difference. You can deter.
But how about the U.S.? Because we're talking about the U.S.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's the response will be the same. Will be the same. But the differences, there's Article 5 of Mutual Defense Treaty, but in that treaty, it says once arms attack happened, you have to report to the UN Security Council. Once the UN Security Council decide to take measures, you have to stop your action. And each country will have to go through constitution, individual constitution procedure to decide how to respond. It takes time.
So I guess what I'm asking, is it a good equivalent for China to be judging response times from the US?
It can be a reference, but not totally the same. I think they're smart enough to distinguish what's the differences. That's because lots of activity Tony mentioned that certainly provide deterrence against China use of force, but will not deter them keep using Coast Guards or maritime militia. But in Taiwan's situation, that's totally different. Once they decide to use of force, it cannot be deterred. So if Beijing consider the red line has been crossed, or they consider that a peaceful reunification possibility no longer exists. Once they decide to use of forces, nothing can be deterred. They have to finish their job, their missions.
Okay,
so
we'll have to end it there. So sorry about that. Tianlin Yan, Tony Hu, Ronan Fu, thank you so much for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.